Hi and welcome back to the channel. So we are beginning phase 2 of this car's life with me bringing it back, and that involves putting the 302 in, and this is where we currently are. So not much has happened. But I'm going over this engine, and to recap, this is an engine I purchased used. Did hear it run, and know it's good that way, but it's kind of a mystery. The person I bought it from got it in a car that he purchased, that he bought to put in a Coyote engine. So did not care about this engine at all, but it has quite a few things done to it that lead me to believe that it's at least a little bit built. And also it's been rebuilt and is very clean and fresh inside and all that. So what we've got here is a 302 out of a 68 or 9 Torino or Fairlane, according to the casting numbers. And it's got some cast iron Roush cylinder heads on it, which are supposed to be about the equivalent of a GT40 head in modern times. And has electronic ignition and roller tip cop cam rockers and other things. And in the process of trying to figure out what cam it has in, I took the timing cover off, and lo and behold, someone has put a gear drive in it. Now, this is not going to stay for two reasons. One is these are very noisy and they sound like blowers. They call them the poor man's blower. And the other reason is, I have it mocked up here because I actually had taken it apart, but this is not on correctly. But this is how I found this when I took the cover off. And that is how the gears were meshing on the crank. This is not a rigid mounted model. This is probably a bargain because it doesn't have a name on it anywhere I could see. Maybe Chinese, but I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. But it's not a rigid mount, so this thing can just float around in here and do whatever it wants to do, and that does not impress. So I'm going to get rid of this. It's not necessary. I'm just going to get a double roller chain and sprocket set, probably an Edelbrock, and put on there because I want to get a USA made one, and I think Edelbrock's the only one right now that is doing that. Cloy's is a big question mark. I've used theirs in the past, and that's unfortunate that they've maybe changed how they do things. So took that off and apart, and unfortunately there are no marks on the end of the camshaft, so we have no idea what it is. So I'm going to try measuring that today using the Uncle Tony's garage method with a dial indicator and mounting that on top of the valve train and seeing if I can figure out what the lift is, at least get an approximate idea, because I have to order new valve springs for this because this one has valve springs with dampers and several of the dampers are broken, so need to be replaced. I'm just going to go ahead and probably replace all the valve springs with something that doesn't hopefully have dampers in it, that I don't have to be worried about that again. Other issue we're going to run into that I don't know if I mentioned, the engine came with some slightly rusty but still solid Hooker Competition Plus headers, and Hooker's always made very good headers. I used to sell parts in a speed shop years ago, and Hooker was at the top of the choices back then. But unfortunately, this car, because I want to retain the column shifter for the automatic, will not work with headers. There's not enough clearance in there for the lever to do its thing, which is kind of disappointing, but yet headers are also a giant pain in the ass if you've ever owned them. Always fighting leaks and trying to get the bolts in and out and all that, so I'm not too upset to see them go. I might lose a couple horsepower, but wah. I'm going to buy some small block hypo exhaust manifolds and use those instead, and they should fit in there just fine. The Meloden oil pan is probably overkill, and I debated about replacing it with a more stock pan because I was worried about ground clearance. But in looking at the car underneath, the current oil pan, for the 6 anyway, I imagine it hangs about the same depth as the 302 one would. It is actually tucked up probably an inch above the cross member under there. So this is only an inch and a quarter, I think, something like that, deeper than a stock one. So I doubt it's going to hang down below the cross member. If it does, it's not going to be by much. So there should be more than adequate clearance for that thing under there. And since it's here and bought and paid for, I guess we'll just hold on to it. And it's a little dirty in here, but not bad. I didn't find any metallic chunks at all, which is, of course, good news. It does have a one-piece oil pan gasket, which we're going to duplicate again because I like that idea. And replace, of course, the front gaskets, and I'll put a new crank seal in to try to keep that nice. It has a stock harmonic balancer, which I think I'm just going to reuse. It looks like it's in decent shape. And if we look underneath here, you can see that this engine is squeaky clean and very fresh, and clearly has new bearings in it, new pistons. It's just lovely. I've had the bore scope down in the bores and everything, and very happy with that. So it should be ready to go. It's just a matter of now figuring out what the devil we have for a cam. But that they put a Edelbrock carb and a Performer intake on here kind of tells me it's not a ridiculous build. I just don't know why we went to the trouble of putting that gear drive on there. I just don't see the point of that. So if anybody's looking for one, I got one for sale. But it'll probably be gone by the time you see this video. Thermostat housing, I'm going to replace. That was all gunked up, and there's the thermostat. It was completely clogged. But we managed to clean that up. It is a aluminum, I think, with the O-ring gasket on it, which I wasn't necessarily going to replace because this one looked like it had been weeping a little bit. But stock replacements do not get good reviews for fit. So I found one on Summit that is the same design, but I think it's a better quality piece. Got several dozen excellent reviews that it doesn't leak and it fits perfectly. So we're going to try that one. Got your aluminum pulleys here. We'll just reuse those. And that's kind of where we are. So I'm going to go ahead today and try to figure out what cam this might have in it, and ordering the parts to put it all back together then. And that step in the process will be done. All right, this Millodin or whatever oil pan, I'm a little disappointed in this thing. The construction quality is really good, but this gold anodizing is next to useless. It's already failing and allowing corrosion to start on this thing. So I'm going to wind up just painting this to try to keep it from getting worse. Especially down here, you can just see it's really pretty nasty. So that's going to get painted engine color and try to stop that from getting any worse. Well, as you can see, things have escalated. I debated on posting this because it's really embarrassing, but I thought I would go ahead and share my idiocy with the world. This was still not a bad deal. I'm okay with it, and what has happened to this engine is probably my fault. So we're going to go through that. As you might recall, this engine came with a gear drive in the end. In the process of trying to measure this cam to figure out what the heck it was, because there were no numbers on it, I had the gear drive attached to the front, and I think I had the cam bolt either out or it was loose. And I'm turning it over at the flywheel end, which gives great leverage and some of you are already knowing where this is going to go, versus just doing it at the front. And the reason we couldn't do it at the front was because the crank bolt was destroyed. It came out looking pretty much like that. So that was already done by the previous installer or owner. And so I'm turning it over with the flywheel and a pry bar and getting occasional tight spots. And one of the reasons it didn't give me pause was I thought that the flywheel, or flex plate in this case, was making contact with the bolt on my engine stand, which it does kind of. This thing has just a little bit of a wobble to it and it will scrape. But with the engine all together, I couldn't determine exactly how much resistance was from that bolt. Well, it turns out it really wasn't much. Something was going on here at the front while I'm spinning away at the back with the gear drive, and eventually the top pulley fell off. That was my first indicator that something was amiss. So as we went forward and looking at things and doing these measurements, I came to discover that I had some bent push rods. How many? Oh, about that many. Now, none of them are really bad. They all had a little tiny wobble to them. But one or two were significantly bent. And that left me with 3 good ones. That's not good. So I bought push rods. In the meantime, I'm still trying to deal with the valve spring situation and replaced a couple of bad valve springs that had those dampers that were broken. I decided not to do the whole set because they're expensive, and I did finally figure out, I think, what these were. So I got those replaced. In the process of doing that, I discovered that the valve seals were all rock hard and half of them were falling apart or missing. So we had to get valve seals, valve stem seals. And what I chose to do there, well, let me back up. Not what I chose to do. I ordered the Ford factory things, or they came in the kit, I think, with my intake or one of those sets. And of course, they didn't fit. And it's because these Roush heads use a different style valve and all kinds of nonsense there. So I wound up getting Chevrolet ones, which fit perfectly. So if you ever run into that, the Chevrolet ones are just a little bit bigger to fit over the valves and the guide at the bottom or whatever's there. And so I got that solved. So I got these heads all kind of together. Now I was doing this with the heads on the car, trying not to remove the heads because that was more work, right? Even though this was a giant pain in the ass to get these springs and seals done. So I had most of them done. And in the process of using the air into the spark plug holes to hold the valves closed, I discovered that one of them did not hold pressure. As soon as you push the air into the cylinder, it would rush out, and it was rushing out the intake. Oh dear, that's a problem. So, time to take the heads off. And what did we find? Well, this is what we found. Yep, I have 2 of them like that, or had. Now I have 2 new valves, which is also fun because these heads had some kind of non-standard Manley valves in them, which I had to carefully measure and try to find matching ones. And I think I was able to come up with a comparable replacement from Manley. They are not 100% identical because the ones in here have the extra groove cut in for a second keeper, which they don't use in this application. So I don't know why that is. The replacements only have the top one, but it matches the location on this one, so that should not be an issue. So that's fun. All right, so we got the valves in. So now we are back to having basically a short block. And I'm pretty sure that I did that damage to the valves when I was turning this engine over, and the gear in the front here got loose and probably wobbled off the shaft part way, and I was still turning it and things weren't lined up. So it left some marks in 2 of the pistons, obviously, but having cleaned these up, okay, I think you can just see it there. they should be fine. That's very, very small. Two of them were bent. Two of them had left witness marks on two other pistons, but were not bent. I did check the edges and everything and made sure they were okay, and they sealed fine. So now just cleaning all the carbon off, and you can see I have tons of it on me here. Just wire brushing that off and getting that clean again. So here we are. I had to spend more money on valves and more gaskets and all that stuff. So that is my story of being a moron and not paying attention to what I'm doing and doing a rookie mistake and causing more damage and more work for myself. Fabulous. On a slightly more upbeat note, I did get my exhaust manifolds in. These are the Hypo 289 manifolds you would normally find on Mustangs. And we're using these because there isn't enough clearance with the steering column shifter to put on headers that anybody currently makes, from what I have been able to find out. So I'm going to do this. Obviously it's not the best, but again, this car isn't going to be setting any records going down the drag strip. It's just going to be on the road doing its regular car things. So I'm going to continue with putting all this together, and I'll see you again soon once more progress has been made. Once again, you never know what you're going to get when you buy a used engine, or a engine that somebody else has put together, maybe even hasn't been run. And this is the case with this one, that we found an interesting thing here, that we are 40 over on the pistons. So this thing's had an overbore, and it's now 40 over. So that gives a little bit more displacement. Really, honestly, I don't think it's enough that it makes any real difference, but we know now that this has definitely seen a machine shop and was hopefully, fingers crossed, professionally put together, but it's obviously been bored and the pistons made to match. So that's kind of a nice surprise, although 40 over is quite a bit. Makes me think that the donor engine was probably either badly worn or maybe had some rust that needed cleaning up. So at 40, it's probably not able to be bored again, so this is going to be its last build in its lifetime, but this car's not going to probably need a rebuild for another 20, 30 years easy, so it's not going to matter. So that was interesting to find that out. All right, and here we have the head with the head gasket laying up against it. And I wanted to show this because this was an interesting thing to find too. These are the cooling passages in the cylinder head, and these holes are smaller than are actually in the head to restrict the flow and kind of control the cooling speed that the coolant goes through. But if you take this head gasket away, you'll see we've got some issues here. These are, this is, I believe, all but completely clogged, as is this one. Now there's a very tiny hole for that one, so that's not that big of a deal, but that's not, I don't think anything's getting through there, and very little is going to make it through that anymore. And all of these are kind of gross looking, so we're going to have to clean all these out. Now this engine, again, does not have a lot of run time on it, but it probably sat for quite a bit. And even with decent cooling in it or what have you, it's still going to build up some residue in there. So got to clean all that out, because otherwise, once that breaks free, that's going to start clogging radiator core passages. So we're going to dig all that out with a little screwdriver and some compressed air, and use the vacuum on it and get it as much of that out as we possibly can. Oh, that's nice. That'll be fine. I probably shouldn't even have to do this, right? What could possibly go wrong? So with all that we found with this engine, would we make the same decision to get a used engine again? Not sure. This engine was about half the price of going and getting a crate engine, and rebuilding one was probably not going to be much less expensive till you had all the machine work and testing and everything done to the block and the crank and all that. So I still think it was a money saver, not counting, of course, the damage that I inflicted upon it. But, you know, it had enough other things questionable about it. I mean, we didn't know what cam was in it. I mean, still really don't. I have an idea what it is, but haven't figured it out exactly. So, and you're also kind of taking what somebody else has put together. You're not building it specifically for your needs. I don't know that I would go this route again. It was probably a risky move, and while I'm not unhappy with what I got, I don't know that it was the best way to go. It probably saved me some money, but I'm not sure I got exactly what I was hoping for with this engine. We won't know until we start it once it's in the car and see what it does. So I don't know. I probably wouldn't recommend anybody do this. I mean, I was fairly comfortable buying this one because I knew it was in a running car, and I had heard it run, although it was only on video because it was already out of the car when I went to pick it up. But, you know, the short block I think is good, and the heads, they're not anything super spectacular, are certainly better than stock, so I got that advantage, and we got intake and carb and things like that. So I think it was a fair deal, but in retrospect, I wouldn't probably go this route again, and I probably wouldn't recommend anybody else do it either. I think you're probably better off building your own engine. I kind of went this way because I do like a hydraulic cam engine, and this stage, with all the problems that people are having with hydraulic lifters, I didn't want to build one like that because getting decent parts right now is so hard. So that this one was already put together and running and didn't have any problems from that is very important. A roller engine would be better, but it comes with some modifications and changes that one has to make to put it in the car. Nothing huge, but it's, you know, something you got to take into consideration. So this kind of suited my needs and appealed to me a little bit better maybe than buying a roller engine. And I had the opportunity to buy one out of a later model Mustang, but I would have had to rebuild it and, you know, do everything, and then I'm, you know, still stuck with whatever heads it came with and going, yeah, I really should buy some, you know, aluminum heads, and that's thousands of dollars usually and all that. So it's the dance between trying to keep your money in your bank account and getting what you need to make a car that runs the way that you want it to. And this is always going to be the constant battle when you're building cars like this. So, no solid answer. There is no really right or wrong answer. There's better answers and worse answers. And if you go this route like I have, you got to be ready for the pitfalls, even aside from the valve train issues that I've had to deal with. Like those coolant passages or something that you need to be conscious of. You might have to deal with. So, that's for this installment, me admitting my colossal blunders and letting you hopefully learn something from it. But we're still moving forward to getting this thing ready to put in the car, and we'll hopefully get to that here in the next couple of months. I'm not working at a very fast pace. I mean, that's obvious by the times that these videos are going up. So if you're following along, hoping for, you know, overhauling type timelines, not going to happen. I only do this when I'm in the mood because it's a hobby, it's not a job. So with that said, I do thank you for watching. I look forward to the comments coming on this one, and I'll see you all very soon. Thanks for watching.